welcome to Markets Media Video. I'm Terry Flanagan, Markets Media Editor. Following up on our 2020 Markets Choice Awards, where we worked with Instinet, and part of the awards were the Positive Change Awards, we are spotlighting some of the charitable organizations that Instinet works with. Today, very pleased to have with us Jeannie Gaffigan, who is founding member of the Imagine Society. Jeannie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So first off, just tell me a little bit about what Imagine Society is. What's the story of the organization?
Well, Imagine Society came out of a vision of uniting youth groups from diverse cultures and communities across New York City to do service projects to better society. And there were a lot of youth group leaders. Like I had some kids in my family that were 12, 13, that age group where there wasn't a lot of cultural offerings for them. It was just kind of getting into the let's hang out in the park type times. And there were other leaders from different aspects of cultures, whether it was at the YMCA or at a temple or at a mosque or at a church, that were kind of struggling to keep the teens engaged. So we started this concept where we could take all these different groups who already were in a group of community service, and as you know, whether it's a bar mitzvah or a confirmation or a certain year in school, there's kind of a requirement to do community service. So the kids started to think of it as kind of a punishment, like I'm sentenced to do community service. But in reality, teenagers love to be creative and they love to have a voice in the world, and they love to work together. So we kind of took advantage of this by creating these events that were kind of like a service con, where we would invite all these kids, and if you didn't have a service group, you could come as a guest of another group, and we would have these little mini conferences with like balloons and pizza and talks from comedians, because as you know, I'm kind of connected in that, that had this kind of unique social perspective on certain ills of society. So the kids would come in and discuss what they saw in their community that they wanted to change, and then they would break up into small groups with kids of their age group from different communities and different religions and different neighborhoods, and try to have a solution in like 45 minutes. So it was kind of a trust exercise.
What were some of the specific projects that came of these exercises?
So out of that came a lot of wonderful service projects, such as we did a project called It Suits You, which was kind of a high-end clothing drive for a rehab program in East Harlem, where people would go from transitional housing to getting job interviews. So we would put together like a beautiful interview outfit for them from donated goods. We would do other things like we did something called the Imagine, where it was for a shelter. We would have the kids shop, cook, and serve a beautiful 5-star dinner and create a restaurant environment, just to make people feel worthy. So then the pandemic happened. So that's when things started to shift, and we really realized that we were onto something here with this sort of service-minded model of leadership for youth. So that's kind of what changed. We morphed with this. I think we did a really good job of transitioning from in-person events to virtual volunteerism. And the vision of this organization is really to create the service leaders of the future. So as far as it is with a business model, and this is why the Instinet relationship is so incredible, is that, as you know, there is a movement towards more of a service model business as well. So these kids that are used to working in a group, and working towards a collective goal, are going to be a different kind of leader and a different kind of worker in the workplace than people who are into the individualism and not really considering the bigger picture. So
Right.
we've noticed that there's been sort of this explosion of collaborative cooperation among our teenagers, and it's turned out to be a really beautiful thing. And we wound up doing a Food for Fearless endeavor where we raised money to feed the frontline workers during the height of the COVID epidemic.
Hmm.
And we wound up having to create an emergency fund because we raised over $100,000.
Wow.
And we had kids manage and research how to book that money to enrich small businesses that were failing because of the shutdown, so they could stimulate their business and deliver meals to the frontline workers when they couldn't leave their shift.
Hmm.
So it was this incredible success.
Certainly, 2020 is a very unique year in a lot of different ways. You just have been talking about COVID crisis. What are some of the other ways that the Imagine Society has gotten involved or stepped up efforts with regard to COVID?
The shelters and the food pantries were in dire need because everything shut down. But there were a lot of people, there's 70,000 people experiencing homelessness in New York. And there's also a lot of people who lost their jobs. It was hard to get food. There were the food pantries, the volunteers all disappeared because they were sheltering at home.
Hmm.
So we were able to adopt a few food pantries that were still open around the city and say, hey, what do you need? We have this group of kids who are ready to get on the phones, do an Instagram campaign. We
Sure.
started something called the Pantry-to-Pantry food drive, where kids would do a virtual food drive where once every 2 weeks they would leave a full bag of groceries from their pantry, extras, outside on their porch, and we would arrange another family to drive around and pick up the groceries, and then meet another car, like in Long Island, and then transfer the groceries into that car, and then that person would drive to the city. So it was kind of this bucket brigade endeavor where the kids would take pictures and put in their Instagram stories and say, would you like to be part of this next month or whatever? So we've just found a way to kind of keep kids engaged in what's going on so they're not in denial of what's happening in the world,
Hmm.
and also in a positive
Hmm.
for hope and for change. And then when all the social unrest started happening, instead of us kind of shying away from it, we're just like, okay, what can we do to make our voices heard? And so we asked the kids to all submit um, essays and artwork of how they were reacting to our newsletter that we put out every 2 weeks. So it's a beautiful virtual event. So it kind of has come to represent these events that we had, where the kids can have their voices heard, they can see their name in a byline, and they can feel like they are part of this kind of new world that we're entering
Hmm.
into. So it's turned out to be a really valuable mental health, uh, mitigating the mental health of being like, oh, my play was canceled, my graduation was canceled, and all this stuff. But instead of concentrating on that, let's concentrate on how we can help and how we can, really have our voices be heard in this new world.
Right. Now, it sounds like a grassroots organization. Do the kids typically get involved, on their own through word of mouth? They're seeing it on social media, or is it also their parents and schools are participating in this?
Well, yes, it's a total grassroots thing. It just kind of like it really kind of found its legs in the pandemic, which is crazy. Um, and it is definitely a word of mouth type of thing. So, for instance, we are doing what happened was Jim and I are entertainers. So, when we first had a shutdown and we had to quarantine at home, we started broadcasting a YouTube show every night called Dinner with the Gaffigans. So we would invite people to come have dinner with us and interact. So it was kind of our way of personally dealing with this, and also using our kind of silly, big family to kind of engage people. So in the very beginning, we started fundraising for different organizations such as the World Health Organization, or whatever YouTube had a link to. And pretty soon, Jim, who's on our board, was like, why don't we raise money for our Imagine Society? So that really started to put the word out of who we are. And a lot of people who watch the show, they don't have any money, but they can write a note to someone who's in the hospital, or we can connect, or they can donate a bunch of juice that they have in their warehouse that is not selling. So we wound up engaging a lot of adult and teen volunteers through that show. So you don't have to have a paid dues or anything to be a member. You just have to want to work to improve and help people. Okay. And so that's the kind of the criteria for joining.
And for someone listening and might be interested in getting involved, what are the direct tangible ways that they can participate? Just go through the website to start?
Well, the first thing you do is you look at our website, and it will list everything we do and what we've done in the past and who we are and who's involved. Then it will say what our current campaigns are. Food for Fearless is through the month of June. Then we're doing Mass Miracles. We're doing a relationship with a food pantry and a homeless shelter in the Bronx. And we're also doing a lot of things that the kids, like the Pantry-to-Pantry food drive. And you can get involved. We're doing something called Messages of Love, where you are drawing a picture, writing a poem, and you're submitting it, a photograph of it, through email. And then once a week, we send it to nursing homes. There's many ways to get involved. And this is the also way, if people send us an email at outreach@theimaginesociety.org, and they say, hey, you know what? We have 16 cases of breadcrumbs to donate to a pantry. What do we do? That's where we can also help connect. We can get people, volunteers who have offered to pick up things and drop things off. It's kind of like this hub of making connections with service. So the first thing that people can do if they want to get involved is go to the website, read about what we do, check out our Instagram at the Imagine Society, where there's photographs of all this stuff actually happening. It's all this adult mentors and staff are all volunteers, so we have no salaries. And a lot of people are unemployed right now, so I have a lot of really talented people helping. And also because the teenagers are out of school, they are looking for things to do that can help them keep busy and feel connected. So right now, the summer is a really great time to get involved with the Imagine Society.
Okay, and are you in New York City only, or New York metro area? What's the geographic reach?
So we started New York City, but then now it's starting to expand to there's a lot of kids who went to their house on Long Island or their house in Westchester and Connecticut. So what happened is that we kind of branched out. So the kid, like all of a sudden, the kid who used to live in Manhattan is now in Connecticut, and they're saying we still want to get involved. So, for instance, we had a family in Connecticut make during Nurses Week make bags of candy, Imagine Society candy bags that we financed, and we sent them the elements for it. And the families got together in their own homes, so it was like sanitary, and made beautiful thank you candy bags for the nurses in a hospital in Connecticut. So although we are incorporated as a not-for-profit in New York, it's hard to contain kindness, right? It spreads like, I don't want to say what it spreads like, but it spreads like it.
Okay, and just the last question, if we were to spin this forward a little bit, Jeannie, what is your vision for the future of the Imagine Society?
I think that the vision for the future is to create a lot of relationships with other organizations. So we can expand into, having a chapter in different schools. I would like other states to have uh, connections with the Imagine Society. And I think the best way to do that is to kind of tap into existing organizations. So rather than, selling the model or whatever, it's more like, um, how can your organization in, Oklahoma use some of these principles to engage teenagers and adults to form relationships and enrich their communities and sort of better society and create kind of a vision for the future where there's not a lot of different organizations kind of trying to do the same thing and spinning their wheels, but opening up connections between organizations and individuals. And that's where I think that our success has come from, because we are open to working with other organizations and kind of making we're unifying the vision of a lot of different not-for-profits, and therefore we are growing the goodness in society.
Sure. Great. Really interesting story. Jeannie, thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Terry Flanagan, Markets Media Editor, speaking with Jeannie Gaffigan, founding member of the Imagine Society.